Practicing Christian. So in ninth grade at one of our chapel services, a group that went on the mission trip before showed a little clip of what they did in their experience. And for some reason it just really touched my heart, and I just felt such a tugging to go. But I was so fearful of going. If anyone knows me, they'll tell you I don't like going away. I get super homesick. So I used it as an excuse not to go. I just kept resisting the call that God was giving me. So I was talking to some of my friends, and they said, I'm just going to go senior year, and that'll be that. So I kind of thought about it, and I was like, yeah, I'll just push it off to senior year, and hopefully something will come up and I won't have to go. So, talking about being selfish, right? So as it came closer, I applied, I wrote why I wanted to go, and why I wanted to go, and, everything. So for some reason, I was just really relaxed about going. I had such a peace about going. I wasn't worried about it. Usually I just wouldn't be able to eat before I went away. I had no problem. I was just so at peace with what I really felt that this was just God leading me there. And it was crazy because going with the flow just is not something I do. I like, knowing what I'm doing, where I'm going, and all that. And now, I'm on my way to a foreign country with people who aren't practicing Christians, and I was like, just scared. So one night, as Mexico got closer, I came to youth group, and I was talking to Kristen, and she was telling me about people she know that went on the same trip I did, and she encouraged me, and she said, if you go there with the mindset of being God's hands and feet, you're going to be blessed. And I was just so thankful that someone understood where I was coming from, that, it's really hard being in the midst of other people that say they're Christians and are not practicing, and now you're in a foreign country trying to witness. How can you be a proper witness? So my friends in school, they're just at a different spiritual level than me. So we got there and we took a 6-hour plane ride, and we drove about 7 hours to a small village called Chigurna. And I wanted to give to someone who couldn't give me anything back. Again, having selfless faith, putting my faith into action. We worked 10-hour days. We mixed cement with sand, gravel, water, and that's how we made it. We made the roofs and got to meet the families we worked for. Honestly, that was our inspiration, our motivation, was when we were mixing the cement, and it's just so hot, and you're just constantly working for 10 hours. And then you see the families, and you're just like, no, you got to keep going. You can't stop. They're living in these temporary houses that are made out of metal off the street. And, their form of a security system was broken glass bottles on top of a fence, and that's how they lived. And it was just people, the faces you see on TV, and Joyce Myers, with a little boy that's African American or a little Mexican or something, and you're just looking, you're like, oh, it's faces on TV. But when you got there were people with real feelings and worries just like us that doubted and needed encouragement and needed something it was something different that we had in common because we were able to understand that God is everywhere. And it's just the materialistic things that got in the way of that. It had nothing to do with our faith. So as the days went on, our groups met, and one girl spoke about Peter being in the boat when Jesus walked on water. He must have been so scared that he did it. He got out of his comfort zone, and he just was able to walk on water with Christ. That's what he did when he got out of his comfort zone. And I always wondered why people said, when I went to Mexico, I was so changed. Really? Why? Did it change you forever? Why did it change you? And the answer I really believe God revealed to me was that God can give you those moments anywhere you go. In Jeremiah 1, it says, be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified or discouraged. The Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And people came to Mexico expecting to find God. And most importantly, they were listening to his still small voice. When we're listening to his still small voice, it's different because we have that personal, intimate relationship with Christ. But why can't we do that back at home, too? So I was speaking to one of the women there, one of the village women, and she said to me, she was just having a normal conversation with me, and she said, do you build roofs in America, too? And it broke my heart to have to say no. And I was just said, if she could only know how we live in America and how much excess things that we have that we don't really need, and how selfish, we really are. So they would actually make us little pins out of shells and glue them together and give it to us, and they were just so excited, and the moms that have the little boys, bring them forward, and they would just be so happy that they could give us something in return for something that we gave them. But I didn't want to just give them material things. I wanted to give them something spiritual on top of that. So later that night, we had some of the kids, and we would have little family groups, and one of the girls wrote up, how are we going to build roofs in America? And it really struck me. Do we witness to people like it's our last time we're speaking to them? Do we cherish the people we're with? Are we building those roofs for people in need? God said that we were to take care of the poor and the widows. I don't want a pat on the back for doing something I'm commanded to do. If anything, I feel selfish for not jumping on this opportunity earlier and stepping out of the boat where Jesus is. So me and my friend, we would translate the coloring books Miss Lenore gave us, and we would try to have them know about God's love through a fun way, and just be able to just relate to them on a spiritual level. Do you know they say America is one of the hardest mission fields? And I was like, no, that can't be. And I was listening to the radio, and they said it's because you can say the word God, and everyone can be thinking of something else. And it really struck me that we've gotten to the point where there's no foundation in our schools or anywhere except for churches. One of the people in my group really thought that there were tons of ways to get to heaven, and then you go to a Christian school. And I had to tell them, no, Jesus is the way, the truth, and life. No one comes to the Father except through him. And as the week progressed, I would sit in the stands with a few of my Christian friends, and we would just be praying like God would just reveal himself to everybody who wasn't Christian. I mean, there was a lot of people that weren't Christian that went on the trip because they thought it would be something good to do. So the next day we were sitting down, and we had a day off, and we went into Merida. And one of the girls from my school, who is not a Christian, and when you saw her, you would probably say, she's not a Christian. But she came up to me and she said, hey, Tori, I think I believe now, and just like such like a happy way. And I was like, what? What do you mean? She said, I'm not questioning anymore. I think I really believe. Seeing these people makes me really want to believe. And she had no idea that I had been praying that someone would have some sort of spiritual revelation, and she said to me, I just thought you'd want to know that. And I was just sitting there, and I was trying not to tear, putting on my sunglasses, just like, oh my gosh, this is so cool, trying to witness to her. But here our relationships were just different. We saw each other through God's eyes and not through our flesh, and we just kept ourselves focused on what God had for us. And I was just so taken back by this. Some of the kids in my group said they didn't even know how to pray. They didn't know how to pray. And by the end of the trip, the kids who didn't even know about God was actually praying and volunteering to pray. And it was something, just to see someone's spiritual growth in 8 days away from the phone and the computer, and to be able just to get to that point, and you're so low, and I was just going through a lot, and I went there, at your lowest point, the best thing to do is to help someone else, because it's the best therapy, it really is. But far more than that, I shared a feeling of knowing that there's a whole other world out there, and that I was a part of just for 1 week. I was able to see past any of my problems or distractions. It was just me and God, and I'll never be the same, I can honestly say that. But my spiritual life didn't start in Mexico. It didn't start on a missions field. It started here and now, and it just grew there. It's a growth process. I want to encourage you to step out of the boat, get out of your comfort zone, and prayerfully consider missions trips. But most importantly, don't miss out on God's calling, what He's called you to do. It'll bless you spiritually. I didn't want to leave because I loved how the heat and the hard work brought out all those impurities, and it brought out really the best in us. And it showed me how people can live with or without nothing, as long as God is there, it's all you need. And I want to encourage you to, answer God's calling in your life. Right now, you may feel a tugging on your heart to do something for Christ, and you're just in situations where you're just afraid to come out. I encourage you to come out because it's the best leap of faith you'll ever do. You can tell someone about Christ all you want, but there's a general leap of faith to be able to put your trust and your whole life in His arms as well. I know there's a mission trip to Nicaragua coming up, and I encourage you to really prayerfully consider that. In Christ, you can do all things. Don't think that if you're too small, you don't matter enough, because God has a calling in your life, and I would just pray that you would answer it. God is awesome. I didn't have to focus on my fears or worries while I was there. If God leads you somewhere, He will lead you, and everything will fall into place perfectly. I'm not talking about those moments where people say, God was there and it was awesome, and I'll go back to normal. I'm talking about the moments where God was just right here, and you can just feel Him, and you know that He was with you. And I encourage you to step into God's will for your life and just be able to understand that there's a whole lot going on outside of there rather than just what you're seeing in this world. It really opens your eyes how they are just people, normally like us, and how we need someone to encourage us. They don't have that advantage a lot of the time. And there are girls our age, feeding children, and out of dirty buckets of water and fish, and the kids, they handed those sandwiches with flies on them, and I was like, this is how they live, this was normal to them, and to us, it was just, you were able to be a part of something that was their culture just for a week. I really wanted to understand what it was all about, and I was able to really see it wasn't just a matter of God, it was about my spiritual life taken to a new level because I wasn't thinking about myself. I was so straightforward thinking about the kids and what they must be going through. The last day we left, some girls just we would always joke together, and she'd call me crazy, because we'd always just joke around. And she just came up to me and she gave me the biggest kiss on my head, and I was so taken back, and she was like, I'm really going to miss you in Spanish. She wrote it on a letter for me. And she asked me, do you have any shoes? Do you have any shoes for my little brother? Little brother wasn't even 1 year old, and all he had was this little tee and this weird cowboy hat someone must have donated. And I was just like, this is all he had. And they were just so happy, that I gave them crackers. Crackers. They're sitting in my closet for a month now. And that's what they live off of, So I'd encourage you just to step out of the boat and do what God has called you to do. If God's calling you, just answer. And that will be my prayer for you.